The morning sun barely broke through the thick smoke that covered what used to be Chicago. Jack Morrison crouched behind a broken concrete wall and watched the alien patrol move through the empty streets below. 3 years had passed since the Vex came to Earth, and nothing looked the same anymore. The tall buildings that once reached toward the sky now stood like broken teeth. Most had holes blown through them or entire floors missing. The streets were full of twisted metal and rubble. No cars moved on the roads. No people walked on the sidewalks. The only sounds came from the alien machines that crawled through the ruins like metal spiders. Jack shifted his weight and felt the familiar ache in his left shoulder, where shrapnel had torn through his Marine uniform during the first battle. That seemed like a lifetime ago now. Back then, he thought the military could stop the invasion. He thought Earth's armies would find a way to fight back. He was wrong about many things in those early days. The Vex patrol disappeared around a corner, and Jack signaled to his team. Maria Santos moved first, her small frame making almost no sound as she crossed the street. She carried a heavy bag full of salvaged alien technology that she somehow understood better than anyone else Jack knew. Behind her came Tom Bradley, the medic who kept them all alive with whatever medical supplies he could find. Lisa Chen brought up the rear, always listening to her radio for messages from other groups of survivors. They made their way through the ruins toward the old shopping district. Jack had spotted something there yesterday that might be useful. The Vex often left equipment behind when they moved their forces, and Maria could sometimes make it work for them. The group stopped at what used to be a department store. The front windows were all broken, and the inside was dark. Jack went in first, his rifle ready. The others followed, staying close together. They had learned to move as one person. It was the only way to stay alive. Inside the store, broken mannequins lay scattered across the floor like plastic bodies. Jack stepped over them carefully. His boots made small crunching sounds on the glass and debris. The team moved deeper into the building, looking for anything they could use. Maria found what she was looking for near the back of the store. A Vex communication device lay half-buried under fallen ceiling tiles. She pulled it free and examined it with her small flashlight. Her face lit up with excitement. "This one still has power," she whispered. "I might be able to make it work." Jack nodded and continued searching the area. Tom found some canned food that had survived the destruction. Lisa discovered batteries that still worked. Every small victory mattered now. Every piece of equipment or food they found meant another day of survival. A distant sound made them all freeze. The deep humming noise that meant Vex aircraft were coming. Jack motioned for everyone to stay low and quiet. They pressed themselves against the walls and waited. The sound grew louder. Through the broken roof, Jack could see the dark shapes of alien transports moving across the sky. But these were not normal patrol flights. These ships flew in formation, heading toward the industrial area outside the city. Lisa adjusted her radio and caught part of a transmission from another survivor group. The message was broken and hard to understand, but Jack heard enough to know something big was happening. The other group reported seeing a convoy of vehicles moving toward an old factory complex. After the aircraft passed, the team carefully made their way to a higher floor where they could see more of the surrounding area. Jack used his binoculars to scan the horizon. What he saw made his blood run cold. A long line of armored vehicles moved along the old highway. But these were not just Vex machines. Mixed in with the alien transports were trucks carrying human prisoners. Jack could see people in chains being moved like cargo. Some looked like ordinary civilians, but others were different. They wore strange metal collars and moved with an odd mechanical precision. "Those are the new ones," Tom said quietly, looking through his own binoculars. "The ones they changed." Jack had heard rumors about what the Vex were doing to captured humans. They took the strongest and smartest people and did terrible things to them in their laboratories. When these people came back, they were no longer fully human. They had been turned into weapons that served the alien invaders. The convoy stopped near a large building that used to make cars before the invasion. Jack watched as the prisoners were unloaded and marched inside. The humans, with metal collars, moved differently than the others. They walked in perfect lines and never looked around. Their movements were too precise, too controlled. Maria gasped and grabbed Jack's arm. "Look at the tall one in front," she whispered. Jack focused his binoculars on the figure she pointed to. The man was bigger than the others and wore more advanced equipment. But there was something familiar about the way he walked, even with the strange mechanical movements. The man turned slightly, and Jack saw his face. His heart nearly stopped. David Kane, his old friend from the Marines, his partner through 3 tours of duty before the invasion. The man who had saved Jack's life more times than he could count. But David was different now. Half of his head was covered with metal plates and glowing circuits. His left arm had been replaced with something that looked more like a machine than human flesh. Tubes and wires ran along his neck and disappeared under his uniform. David's eyes glowed with a faint blue light that was definitely not human. He stood perfectly still as the other prisoners were processed, showing no emotion or recognition of his surroundings. The friend Jack remembered would never have stood by while innocent people suffered. "They turned him into one of their hunters," Lisa said softly. "I heard about these on the radio. They're the worst ones. The Vex use them to hunt down other humans." Jack lowered his binoculars and felt rage building in his chest. The aliens had not just conquered Earth. They had stolen the best of humanity and turned them into monsters. They had taken his friend and made him into a weapon against his own species. The convoy finished unloading and moved on, taking David and the other augmented humans with them. Jack watched until they disappeared from sight, then turned to his team. "We need to find out more about these hunters," he said. "And we need to find a way to help them." Maria looked uncertain. "Jack, they might not be able to be helped. What if the changes are permanent?" "Then we'll find out for sure," Jack replied, "but I won't give up on them. Not on David. Not on any of them." The team gathered their supplies and prepared to leave, the ruined store. As they made their way back through the empty streets, Jack made a silent promise. The Vex had taken his world, his military, and his friend. But they had not taken his determination to fight back. Somewhere out there, David Kane was being forced to serve the enemies of humanity. But Jack Morrison was still free, and as long as he drew breath, he would find a way to bring his friend home. The war was far from over. 2 weeks had passed since Jack saw David with the hunter convoy. The image of his old friend turned into a machine haunted his dreams every night. Jack woke up each morning more determined to find answers about what the Vex had done to the captured humans. Maria worked day and night on the alien communication device they had found. She had managed to get it partially working, but the signals it picked up were mostly in the Vex language. Lisa helped translate what she could, but most of the alien words meant nothing to them. The team had moved their base to an old subway tunnel beneath the city. The underground location kept them hidden from Vex patrols, and the thick concrete walls blocked most scanning equipment. Tom had set up a small medical area in one corner, while Maria used another section as her workshop. Jack paced back and forth in the main tunnel, planning their next move. They needed more information about the hunters and the facilities where the Vex created them. The only way to get that information was to raid one of the alien research centers. "I think I've found something," Maria called out from her work area. She had spread alien documents across a makeshift table and was studying them with a magnifying glass. The team gathered around her as she pointed to what looked like technical drawings. The papers showed human figures connected to strange machines by wires and tubes. Other diagrams displayed the metal implants that the hunters carried in their heads and bodies. "These are blueprints," Maria explained. "Instructions for how they change humans into hunters. Look at this part here." She pointed to a detailed drawing of a brain with metal devices attached to it. Thin wires ran from the devices to other parts of the body. Numbers and symbols covered the margins of the paper. The metal things in their heads are not just weapons, Maria continued. They control everything the person thinks and does. But see these connections here? They run on electrical signals, just like our own brains do. Tom leaned closer to examine the drawings. So the aliens are basically overriding the human nervous system? Exactly, Maria said. But electrical systems can be disrupted. If we could generate the right kind of electromagnetic pulse, we might be able to interfere with the control signals. Jack felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. What would that do to the hunters? In theory, it could temporarily break the alien control, Maria replied. The original human personality might be able to surface, at least for a while. Lisa shook her head. Even if that worked, how would we generate enough electromagnetic energy to affect multiple hunters? We barely have enough power to keep our radio working. Maria shuffled through more of the alien documents. That's the problem. We would need massive amounts of electrical power, more than we could ever produce with our current equipment. The team spent the rest of the day studying the alien papers and discussing possible solutions. Most of their ideas seemed impossible with their limited resources. They had no access to major power sources, and building their own generator would take months they did not have. That night, Jack volunteered to take the first watch while the others slept. He sat near the tunnel entrance, listening for any sounds that might indicate danger. The city above was never completely quiet. Strange mechanical noises echoed through the empty streets as Vex machines continued their patrols. Around midnight, Jack heard different sounds. Footsteps. Human footsteps. He grabbed his rifle and moved carefully toward the sound. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, moving slowly with their hands visible. "Don't shoot," one of them called out quietly. "We're human. We got your radio signal." Jack recognized the voice of Robert Miller, a former police officer who led another survivor group from the south side of the city. With him were 2 people Jack had not met before, a young woman and an older man. "We need to talk," Robert said, as he approached. "We found something you need to see." The group woke the others and gathered in the main tunnel. Robert introduced his companions as Nancy Davis, a former security guard, and Frank Wilson, who had worked as an engineer before the invasion. "Yesterday, we raided a Vex supply depot," Robert began. "We were looking for food and medical supplies, but we found something else. Research files that were being transported to one of their main facilities." Frank opened a waterproof bag and pulled out more alien documents. These papers looked different from the ones Maria had been studying. They contained maps, building layouts, and what appeared to be work schedules. "This is a complete blueprint of a Vex research center about 30 miles north of here," Frank explained. "It shows where they keep their equipment, where they hold prisoners, and most importantly, where they perform the augmentation procedures." Maria examined the new documents with excitement. "This facility is much bigger than anything we've seen before. Look at all these laboratories and holding areas." Nancy leaned forward. "That's not all. We also intercepted communications that suggest they have a major operation planned. They're going to process a large group of prisoners tomorrow night." Jack felt his heart rate increase. "How many prisoners?" "At least 50, Robert replied, "including some that were captured from the eastern districts last week." The team studied the facility blueprints late into the night. The research center was heavily defended with multiple guard towers and automated weapon systems. Worse yet, it was patrolled by several squads of hunters who would be nearly impossible to avoid. "This is suicide," Tom said finally. "Even if we could get inside, we'd never make it out alive." But Jack was already forming a plan. "We're not going there to fight our way in and out. We're going for information. If we can get into their computer systems or steal more research files, we might find the technical details we need to build our own electromagnetic weapon." Maria nodded slowly. "The facility would have its own power generators. Big ones, too. Run all that equipment. If we could figure out how to tap into that power source, we could test the electromagnetic pulse theory right there, Jack finished. On the prisoners they're about to convert. Lisa looked uncertain. That's assuming we can get inside, access their computers, modify their equipment, and get out before they stop us. Too many things could go wrong. Everything we do could go wrong, Jack replied. But this might be our only chance to save those people, and to learn how to save David and all the other hunters. Frank spread out a detailed map of the area around the research facility. The good news is that most of their defenses are designed to keep people from escaping, not from breaking in. If we approach from the east, we might be able to avoid the main guard positions. Robert pointed to several locations on the map. My team can create diversions here and here to draw their attention away from your insertion point. The plan was dangerous and complicated, but it was better than anything else they had. As the sun began to rise above ground, the two groups prepared to separate and make their final preparations. Jack looked at his team members, seeing determination mixed with fear in their faces. Tomorrow night, they would attempt something that could either give humanity new hope or get them all killed. But for the first time since seeing David in that convoy, Jack felt like they were finally taking action instead of just surviving. The research facility held answers they desperately needed, and he was willing to risk everything to get them. The war against the Vex was about to become much more personal. The old subway tunnel buzzed with activity as both survivor groups prepared for the mission. Jack cleaned his rifle for the third time that morning while Maria worked on modifying their communication equipment. The plan to infiltrate the Vex research facility was set for tonight, but something Lisa heard on the radio changed everything. Jack, you need to listen to this, Lisa called out, adjusting the dials on her radio. Static filled the tunnel before a weak voice came through the speakers. This is Dr. Sarah Williams, broadcasting from the University Observatory. Any survivors listening need to know about the lunar event happening in 2 weeks. The supermoon will be closer to Earth than it has been in over 60 years. Jack stopped cleaning his rifle and walked over to the radio. What does that have to do with us? Lisa turned up the volume as the transmission continued. The gravitational effects will be extremely strong. Any electromagnetic signals will be amplified by the lunar field. Repeat, electromagnetic signals will be amplified during the supermoon. Maria dropped her tools and rushed over to join them. Her eyes were wide with excitement. Did she just say what I think she said? Electromagnetic amplification, Lisa repeated. If that's true, then our pulse idea could work on a much larger scale during the supermoon. The team gathered around the radio as Dr. Williams continued her broadcast. She explained that the supermoon would create unique atmospheric conditions that could boost radio waves and other electromagnetic energy far beyond normal levels. The effect will be strongest at precisely midnight when the moon reaches its closest point, the broadcast continued. The amplification field could extend across several hundred miles. Jack felt his heart racing. Maria, what would this mean? For our electromagnetic pulse weapon? Maria grabbed her notebook and started scribbling calculations. If the supermoon can amplify electromagnetic signals like she says, we wouldn't need as much power to generate an effective pulse, but we would still need a significant energy source and the right equipment to focus the signal. Tom joined the discussion. Where could we find that kind of equipment? The research facility? No, Maria said, still writing numbers. We would need something much bigger, something designed to generate and control large amounts of electromagnetic energy. Frank, who had been quiet during the radio broadcast, suddenly spoke up. What about the Fermi National Laboratory? It's about 40 miles west of here. Everyone turned to look at him. What's there? Jack asked. Particle accelerators, Frank explained. Before the invasion, they used them for physics research. Those machines generate enormous amounts of electromagnetic energy. If any of them survived the war, they might be exactly what we need. Maria's eyes lit up. A particle accelerator would be perfect. With the right modifications, we could use it to create a focused electromagnetic pulse during the supermoon. The lunar amplification would spread the signal across the entire region. Lisa pulled out a map and located the Fermi laboratory. It's deep in Vex territory, probably heavily guarded. But think about what we could accomplish, Jack said, studying the map. Instead of saving just the prisoners at one facility, we could potentially free every hunter in the Midwest. The radio crackled again as Dr. Williams concluded her broadcast. The supermoon will occur in exactly 14 days. This information is being repeated every hour for any survivors who can use it. Stay strong and keep fighting. Robert looked at the map and shook his head. Even if the laboratory is intact, getting there would be nearly impossible. We would have to cross through some of the most heavily defended areas the Vex control. Not necessarily, Nancy said, pointing to a route on the map. If we go north first, then circle around through the forest areas, we might be able to avoid the main Vex positions. Jack traced the route she suggested. It was much longer than a direct approach, but it stayed away from the major roads and cities where the aliens concentrated their forces. That would take at least 3 days of traveling, Tom observed. And we would need to carry all our equipment with us. Plus, we would need more people, Maria added. Operating a particle accelerator isn't something our small team could do alone. We would need specialists. Frank nodded. I worked with similar equipment before the war, but we would need at least 2 or 3 more people with technical backgrounds. Lisa had been monitoring different radio frequencies during their discussion. I might be able to help with that. I've been in contact with other survivor groups across the region. Some of them have former scientists and engineers. Over the next several hours, Lisa reached out to various resistance cells through her radio network. The response was better than they had hoped. Dr. Rebecca Foster, a former NASA engineer, was hiding with a group only 20 miles away. Marcus Thompson, an explosives expert who used to work in mining, could meet them halfway to the laboratory. But the most important contact came from an unexpected source. A weak signal from the north brought news that changed everything. This is Professor James Mitchell broadcasting from the Fermi Laboratory ruins. The main accelerator is damaged but might be repairable. Warning to all survivors, this area is heavily patrolled by Vex forces including hunter units. Repeat, hunter units are in the area. Jack grabbed the radio microphone. Professor Mitchell, this is Jack Morrison. We need to reach your location. Can you hold out for 5 more days? The response came back immediately. Jack Morrison? Former Marine Sergeant? We heard about your group from other survivors. Yes, we can hold out, but barely. We have maybe a dozen people here, and food is running low. We're coming with supplies and reinforcements, Jack replied, and we have a plan that might help end this war. As night fell, the 2 groups made their final preparations. The original plan to raid the research facility was postponed. Instead, they would begin the much more dangerous journey to the Fermi laboratory tomorrow morning. Maria packed her tools and the alien research documents. Tom gathered medical supplies for the longer mission. Lisa prepared her communication, equipment for mobile operation. Each person could only carry what was absolutely essential. Jack stood at the tunnel entrance, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere above the clouds, the moon was beginning its approach toward Earth. In 13 days, it would be closer than it had been in decades. Do you really think this will work? Tom asked, joining Jack at the entrance. It has to work, Jack replied. We might not get another chance like this. If we can free the hunters during the supermoon, they could help us fight back against the Vex. And if we fail? Jack was quiet for a moment. Then at least we tried to save them. At least, we didn't give up on David and all the others. The team settled in for their last night in the subway tunnel. Tomorrow, they would begin a journey that would take them through the most dangerous territory on Earth. They would face Vex patrols, automated defenses, and possibly encounter the very hunters they were trying to save. But for the first time since the invasion began, they had a real plan. not just for survival, but for victory. The supermoon was coming, and with it, humanity's best chance to turn the tide of the war. Jack closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind was already focused on the long road ahead. Somewhere out there, David Kane was still trapped inside, his augmented body waiting for rescue. The countdown to the supermoon had begun. The journey to the Fermi laboratory took 4 days instead of 3. The team had to make several detours to avoid Vex patrols and twice had to hide for hours while alien aircraft searched the area. Jack led the expanded group of 15 survivors, through forests and abandoned farmland, always staying away from roads and buildings. Dr. Rebecca Foster proved invaluable during the trip. The former NASA engineer helped them navigate using old survey maps and knew which routes would be safest. Marcus Thompson carried enough explosives to level a building, along with knowledge of how to use them strategically. On the 3rd night, they made contact with Professor Mitchell again. His situation at the laboratory had grown worse. The Vex had increased their patrols around the facility, and his group was running out of food and ammunition. "We can see hunter units moving through the area daily," the professor reported over the radio. "They seem to be conducting some kind of search pattern. We've had to go deeper underground to avoid detection." Jack studied their position on the map. They were still 8 miles from the laboratory, but they could see the tall cooling towers in the distance. The massive concrete structures rose above the tree line like gray monuments against the sky. "We'll be there tomorrow," Jack promised. "Hold your position and stay hidden." The final approach to the laboratory began before dawn. The team split into 3 groups to reduce the chance of detection. Jack led the first group with Maria and Tom. Rebecca took the second group with technical equipment. Marcus brought up the rear with the explosive supplies. As they moved closer to the facility, signs of the war became more obvious. Burned vehicles lined the access roads. Buildings showed damage from explosions and energy weapons. Strange scorch marks on the ground indicated where Vex weapons had been fired. The laboratory complex was enormous. It covered several square miles and included dozens of buildings connected by underground tunnels. Most of the surface structures were damaged, but the main accelerator building appeared mostly intact. Jack used his binoculars to scan the area. Vex patrol drones circled overhead in regular patterns. Ground patrols moved between buildings every 20 minutes. Worst of all, he could see hunter units stationed at key defensive positions. Through the scope, Jack spotted a familiar figure. David Kane stood motionless beside one of the laboratory's main entrances. His augmented body was clearly visible in the morning light. The blue glow from his enhanced eyes could be seen even at a distance. "There he is," Jack whispered to Maria. "David's here." Maria looked through her own binoculars. "I count at least 12 hunters visible from this position. There are probably more inside the buildings." The team regrouped at an abandoned gas station half a mile from the laboratory. Professor Mitchell had told them to look for a hidden entrance near the old cafeteria building. Getting there meant crossing open ground while avoiding multiple patrols. Rebecca examined the facility layout on her tablet computer. "The main accelerator is 3 levels underground. Even if we reach Professor Mitchell's group, we'll still need to get past the hunters to access the equipment." "What about the defense systems?" Tom asked. The professor mentioned automated weapons. Marcus unpacked some of his equipment. "I brought enough charges to take out the main power grid. That should disable most of their electronic defenses. But it will also alert every Vex in the area to our presence." Jack made the decision. "We go in quiet first. Try to reach the professor's group and assess the accelerator. If we can't complete the mission without fighting, then Marcus triggers the explosives and we fight our way to the target." The infiltration began at noon when the overhead patrols were at their lightest. Jack's group moved first, using damaged buildings for cover. They reached the cafeteria without being detected and found the hidden entrance exactly where Professor Mitchell had described. The tunnel led deep underground through a maintenance corridor that connected to the main accelerator chamber. Emergency lighting still functioned in some sections. casting an eerie red glow on the concrete walls. Professor Mitchell met them at a junction between tunnels. He was a thin man in his 60s with gray hair and tired eyes. Behind him were 11 other survivors, including 2 graduate students who had worked on the accelerator before the invasion. "Thank God you made it," the professor said quietly. "The situation up there is getting worse by the hour. The hunters have been searching every building systematically." He led them to a large chamber where the main particle accelerator stretched into the darkness. The machine was massive, with superconducting magnets and control systems that filled the entire underground space. Parts of it were damaged, but the core components appeared functional. Rebecca immediately began examining the HFY accelerator's control systems. "This is much more sophisticated than I expected. With the right modifications, we could definitely generate the electromagnetic pulse we need." Maria unpacked the alien research documents and spread them on a nearby table. "According to these technical specifications, we need to generate a specific frequency to disrupt the hunter control implants." One of the graduate students, a young woman named Sarah, looked at the alien documents with interest. "I helped design the frequency modulators for this accelerator. We should be able to tune it to any wavelength you need." As the technical team worked on the accelerator modifications, Jack and Marcus scouted the upper levels. The hunters were indeed conducting systematic searches, but they seemed to be looking for something specific rather than just checking for survivors. Through a damaged window, Jack watched David Kane leading a squad of augmented humans through the laboratory grounds. His old friend moved with mechanical precision, showing no emotion or curiosity about his surroundings. The sight filled Jack with both sadness and determination. Marcus set up his explosives at strategic points throughout the facility. "When you're ready to activate the accelerator, I can cut the main power to their defensive systems, but we'll only have a few minutes before they respond with everything they have." Rebecca and her team worked through the afternoon and into the evening. The modifications were complex and required rewiring several major components. Sarah proved invaluable with her detailed knowledge of the accelerator's original design. As night fell, Lisa established communication with other resistance groups across the region. Word of their mission had spread, and survivors were preparing for what might happen when the electromagnetic pulse was activated. "People are hiding in underground shelters and metal-lined bunkers," Lisa reported. "They're ready for the signal." Maria completed her calculations as the team prepared for the final phase. "The supermoon reaches its closest point in 18 hours. That's when we need to activate the pulse for maximum effect." Jack gathered everyone in the main chamber. "We have one chance to make this work. Once we start the accelerator, the Vex will know exactly where we are. We'll have to hold this position until the pulse is complete." Professor Mitchell checked the modified control systems one last time. "The accelerator will need approximately 3 minutes to reach full power. During that time, we'll be completely vulnerable." Through the facility's damaged walls, the sound of hunter patrols grew closer. David Kane and his squad were methodically working their way toward the underground levels. Time was running out. Jack looked at his team and saw determination mixed with fear in their faces. Tomorrow night, under the glow of the supermoon, they would either free thousands of augmented humans or die trying. The final countdown had begun. The supermoon rose like a giant silver eye above the Fermi laboratory. Jack stood at a broken window on the second floor, watching the massive lunar disk climb higher in the night sky. In 3 hours, it would reach its closest point to Earth, and their chance would come. Below in the underground chamber, Rebecca and her team made final adjustments to the particle accelerator. The machine hummed with barely contained energy as they completed the last modifications. Sarah had worked for 18 straight hours to ensure the frequency modulators would produce exactly the right electromagnetic wavelength. "All systems are ready," Rebecca reported over the radio. "We can begin the startup sequence on your command." Jack checked his watch. It was 9 o'clock. The timing had to be perfect. If they started too early, the Vex would have time to mount a full counterattack. If they waited too long, They might miss the optimal lunar position. Marcus had positioned his explosives throughout the facility's power grid. The charges would cut electricity to the Vex defensive systems, but leave the accelerators independent, power supply intact. It was a delicate balance that required precise timing. Lisa monitored radio communications from the basement command post. Reports came in from survivor groups across the region. Everyone was in position, waiting for the signal that would tell them the electromagnetic pulse was active. Hunter patrol approaching the east entrance, Tom reported from his observation. Post. Looks like the same squad we saw yesterday. Jack raised his binoculars and focused on the approaching figures. David Kane led 6 other augmented humans toward the building where the hidden tunnel entrance was located. Their movements were perfectly coordinated, showing the mechanical precision that marked all hunters. They're getting too close to the professor's escape route, Maria observed. If they find that tunnel, they'll discover the whole operation. Jack made a quick decision. I'm going down there. I need to draw them away from the entrance. That's suicide, Tom protested. You can't take on 7 hunters by yourself. I'm not going to fight them, Jack replied. I'm going to try something else. He left his rifle with Tom and made his way down to the ground level. The building was dark except for patches of moonlight streaming through broken windows. Jack moved carefully toward the east entrance, staying in the shadows. David Kane and his squad had stopped just outside the building. The augmented leader stood perfectly still, scanning the area with his enhanced sensors. The blue glow from his artificial eyes cut through the darkness like laser beams. Jack took a deep breath and stepped into the moonlight where David could see him. Hello, David. It's been a long time. The hunter squad immediately raised their weapons, but David held up his hand to stop them. For a moment, his mechanical movements seemed to hesitate. His glowing eyes focused on Jack with what might have been confusion. You know me, Jack continued, staying very still. Sergeant David, Kane, 2nd Marine Battalion. We served 3 tours together before this war started. David's head tilted slightly to one side. The other hunters remained frozen, waiting for orders from their leader. For several seconds, the only sound was the distant hum of the particle. Accelerator far below. I remember our last mission before the invasion, Jack said quietly. You saved my life when that building collapsed in Syria. You pulled me out of the rubble even though the enemy was still shooting. Something flickered in David's artificial eyes. The blue glow seemed to waver, and for just an instant, Jack thought he saw recognition there. But then, the mechanical control reasserted itself, and David's expression became blank again. You are human resistance, David said in a voice that sounded like his own, but with an electronic undertone. You will surrender or be eliminated. I won't surrender, Jack replied, but I won't fight you either. Because somewhere inside that machine body, my friend is still alive. David raised his weapon, an advanced energy rifle that could cut through steel, but his movements were slow, almost reluctant. The other hunters looked to him for guidance, but he seemed frozen in indecision. From the radio in Jack's pocket came Lisa's voice. 10 minutes to optimal lunar position. All teams stand by. The sound seemed to break David's hesitation. He stepped forward, his weapon now aimed directly at Jack's chest. Final warning. Surrender now. Jack looked directly into his friend's glowing eyes. David Kane never gave up on his friends, and I'm not giving up on you. The moonlight around them suddenly grew brighter as the supermoon reached its highest point in the sky. Jack could feel the electromagnetic energy building in the accelerator far below. Rebecca's voice came over the radio. Beginning startup sequence now. All personnel take cover. A low vibration ran through the ground as the particle accelerator began powering up. David and his squad looked around uncertainly as strange energy effects started appearing in the air around them. Tiny sparks danced between metal objects, and electronic devices began malfunctioning. What is happening here? one of the other hunters asked, his mechanical voice showing the first signs of uncertainty. David's weapon wavered as competing signals began interfering with his control implants. He pressed his free hand to his head as if in pain. The blue glow in his eyes flickered like a faulty light bulb. 2 minutes to full power, Rebecca announced. The electromagnetic field is building. Around the laboratory, similar scenes were playing out as other hunter patrols began experiencing interference. Some stood motionless as their systems struggled with conflicting commands. Others moved erratically, fighting internal battles between their augmented programming and buried human memories. Marcus triggered his explosives precisely on schedule. The Vex defensive systems went dark just as the particle accelerator reached critical energy levels. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the facility as the aliens realized they were under attack. 1 minute to pulse activation, Rebecca called out. Everyone brace for electromagnetic discharge. David dropped his weapon and staggered backward. The metal plates on his head were sparking, and his artificial limbs twitched uncontrollably. Through his mechanical movements, Jack could see something. Struggling to break free. David, fight it, Jack urged. You're stronger than their programming. Remember who you are. The hunter squad was in chaos. Some had collapsed to the ground, their systems overloaded by the building electromagnetic field. Others were removing their helmets and looking around with confused but distinctly human expressions. Pulse activation in 10 seconds, Rebecca announced. 9, 8, 7. David's eyes suddenly stopped glowing blue. The artificial light died, replaced by natural human eyes that Jack remembered from years of friendship and combat. Recognition dawned on David's face as he looked at Jack. 6, 5, 4. Jack, David said in his own voice, weak but unmistakably human. What did they do to me? 3, 2, 1. Pulse activated. A brilliant wave of energy erupted from the particle accelerator and spread outward through the facility. The electromagnetic pulse was invisible but incredibly powerful, amplified by the supermoon's gravitational field until it covered hundreds of miles. Every hunter within the pulse range suddenly stopped moving as their control implants overloaded and shut down. For the first time in 3 years, thousands of augmented humans were free to think their own thoughts and make their own choices. David fell to his knees as the last of the alien control signals died in his head. When he looked up at Jack, his eyes were completely human again. I remember everything, he whispered. I remember what they made me do. The electromagnetic pulse spread across the Midwest like an invisible tsunami, reaching every corner of the region within minutes. As the supermoon's gravitational field amplified the signal, reports began flooding in over the radio from Resistance, groups hundreds of miles away. Jack helped David to his feet as the freed hunter looked around in confusion and horror. The other members of David's squad were also recovering, removing their helmets and staring at their augmented bodies with dawning awareness of what had been done to them. How long? David asked, his voice shaking. How long was I under their control? 3 years, Jack replied gently. But you're free now. We're all going to be free now. Lisa's voice crackled over the radio with excitement. Jack, you need to hear this. Reports are coming in from everywhere. Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, Indianapolis. Hunters are breaking free all across the region. The sound of Vex aircraft filled the night sky as the aliens responded to the crisis. Their ships circled the laboratory like angry wasps, but they seemed uncertain how to respond. Their most effective weapons, the hunter units, were no longer under their control. Rebecca and her team emerged from the underground chamber, their faces glowing with triumph and exhaustion. The pulse worked better than we hoped, she announced. The supermoon amplified our signal far beyond our calculations. Sarah, the graduate student, was monitoring the accelerator's output on her tablet. We're still generating secondary pulses. Every few minutes, another wave goes out. It should keep the hunter control systems disabled for hours. David picked up his discarded weapon and examined it with new eyes. I know how these work now. I know all their technology. We can use their own equipment against them. Around the laboratory complex, other freed hunters were reaching the same conclusion. Men and women who had been forced to serve the Vex were now turning their augmented abilities toward fighting their former masters. They moved with enhanced speed and strength, but now they fought for humanity instead of against it. Marcus appeared at the entrance, grinning widely. The Vex ground forces are in complete retreat. Without the hunters to support them, they can't hold their positions. Tom set up a medical station to help the freed augmented humans. Many were injured or disoriented from the sudden liberation, from alien control. Some wept as they remembered the things they had been forced to do. Others stood silent, processing the horror of their stolen years. But all of them shared the same burning desire for revenge against their captors. Professor Mitchell joined the group with news from his underground radio setup. The pulse reached as far as St. Louis and Kansas City. Conservative estimates suggest we freed over 10,000 augmented humans tonight. Jack felt a surge of hope, unlike anything he had experienced since the invasion began. 10,000 freed. Hunters meant 10,000 new allies with intimate knowledge of Vex technology and tactics. The war had suddenly shifted in humanity's favor. David tested his augmented arm, flexing artificial fingers that now obeyed his own will. They gave us enhanced strength, improved reflexes, and advanced weapons. They thought they were making us into better slaves. Instead, they created better soldiers for the resistance. Lisa continued monitoring radio traffic as reports poured in from across the region. The Vex are evacuating their major installations. It looks like they're pulling back to heavily fortified positions. They're scared, David observed. For the first time since they arrived, they're actually afraid of us. Maria was studying readings from the particle accelerator on her portable equipment. The electromagnetic field is stabilizing. We should be able to generate additional pulses if we find more hunter populations to free. Rebecca nodded. With the right planning, we could take this technology to other regions. Free the augmented humans on the East Coast, the West Coast, everywhere the Vex have them. As dawn approached, the scope of their victory became clear. The supermoon was setting, but its effect on the electromagnetic pulse had exceeded every projection. Entire Vex-controlled territories were now in open rebellion as freed hunters led human survivors in coordinated attacks against alien installations. Jack stood on the roof of the laboratory building, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant colors. For the first time in 3 years, he could see hope in the morning light. David joined him, still adjusting to his freedom, but growing stronger by the hour. "What happens now?" David asked. "Now we take the fight to them," Jack replied. "We find every hunter unit they still control and we free them. We use their own technology against them. We show them that humanity cannot be conquered." Down in the courtyard, Professor Mitchell was coordinating with resistance leaders across the region. Via radio, plans were already forming for a coordinated offensive against remaining Vex positions. The freed hunters would lead the assault, their augmented abilities finally serving the cause of human freedom. Marcus was teaching other resistance fighters how to use captured Vex weapons and equipment. The aliens' technological advantage was rapidly disappearing as their own tools were turned against them. Tom continued treating the psychological trauma of the freed augmented humans. But even the most damaged among them showed remarkable resilience. The desire for revenge against their captors burned bright in every one of them. Lisa established a regional communication network, linking resistance cells that had been isolated for years. For the first time since the invasion, humanity was fighting as one coordinated force instead of scattered survivors. As the sun climbed higher, reports came in of Vex ships leaving Earth's atmosphere. Some of their forces were retreating entirely, abandoning positions they had held since the beginning of the war. Others were consolidating around their most defensible installations, preparing for siege warfare. David looked at his augmented hand in the morning light. They tried to take away our humanity and use it as a weapon against our own species. But they made a mistake. What mistake? Jack asked. They forgot that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to inspire hope in others, even in the darkest times. David gestured toward the freed hunters below, who were already organizing themselves into military units. Look at them. They're not just free, they're ready to fight. Jack smiled as he watched. His augmented friend, the man he had known before the war, was still there, unchanged despite all the modifications the Vex had made to his body. You're right. They tried to make you into machines, but they couldn't take away what makes you human. The radio crackled, with a message from the University Observatory. Dr. Williams, the scientist who had first told them about the supermoon, was broadcasting again. This is Dr. Sarah Williams to all resistance forces. Astronomical observations confirm that the Vex mothership has left Earth orbit. Repeat, the mothership is retreating. Secondary ships are following. The liberation has begun. Cheers erupted from the laboratory courtyard as the news spread. After 3 years of occupation, the aliens were finally on the run. The supermoon had provided the opportunity, but it was human courage and determination that had seized the moment. Jack looked up at the fading moon, now pale against the blue morning sky. Under its glow, they had sparked a rebellion that would echo across the stars. The Vex had learned too late that enslaving humanity was impossible because the human spirit could never truly be conquered. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, Jack knew that humanity would win. They had their friends back, they had their hope back, and they had turned the enemy's greatest weapons into instruments of liberation. Under the glow of the supermoon, Jack Morrison had indeed sparked the resistance. And now, with their own augmented troops rebelling against them, the aliens were finally learning what it meant to face an aroused and united humanity. The age of human resistance had begun.